Hi, this is Dave with a vinyl review for the Feedback Society. Before I get to the record here that I really want to talk about today, I'll just lay a little bit of the background for you. Like a lot of rock and roll supergroups, Fleetwood Mac are a band that went through a lot of lineup incarnations before they reached the supergroup lineup that most listeners are really familiar with. You had this Fleetwood Mac featuring Peter Green on guitar, and then you had this Fleetwood Mac and also this Fleetwood Mac featuring Bob Welch and a very young Danny Kerwin playing guitar. Then you get into this Fleetwood Mac and, of course, this Fleetwood Mac and eventually this Fleetwood Mac featuring these two, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks on vocals and, of course, with Lindsey on guitar. This was actually a really unsuccessful release for the duo in terms of commercial success. They had plenty of reason to be optimistic about it being successful, but it just never really found an audience, except with Mick Fleetwood, who, after hearing it only once, sought out Lindsey Buckingham to try to recruit him to become a guitar player and songwriter for the band that he'd already had together for at least a decade. This is a really amazing record and actually is suitable for a vinyl review because it's never been properly available on CD unless you want to buy a bootleg burned CD copy that was probably mastered using one of these pieces of vinyl in the first place. The album basically served as an unintentional audition for what would become one of the most successful selling rock and roll acts of all time. And if you haven't heard it and you're a fan of Fleetwood Mac, it's definitely something that you should look into. Stevie Nicks was only 24 or 25 when they wrote and recorded these songs. And her voice sounds as familiar as ever, even at that young age. And you're hearing a collection of songs here that would stack up against any of those multi-platinum Fleetwood Mac albums that they go on to record later. If you want to dig in a little bit more to the history of how Fleetwood Mac lost all of its previous guitarists, that's definitely a journey worth making if you're interested, with all kinds of crazy stories about hallucinogenics and commune cults and earthquakes. But I'll leave you to dive into that on your own if you're interested. Buckingham Nicks from 1973 is actually an album that gets played at my house probably more than any of the other Fleetwood Mac albums because it just kind of it holds up to repeated listens with a lot more of a lifespan. And you can hear exactly why Mick Fleetwood wanted Lindsey Buckingham in his band, because the acoustic guitar work on here is amazing. The production that he's not credited for, but he did have a hand in, is also amazing. And so to kind of hear what John McVie and Mick Fleetwood were listening to when they first decided that they wanted him in their band, this is the record that you need to hear. As legend has it, they weren't really all that interested in having Stevie Nicks in the group, as hard as that may be to believe. They felt like, okay, we already have Christine McVie, we don't need another female vocalist in the band. On trying to recruit Lindsey, he basically explained to them that they were a package deal and the rest is history. There's a version on here of Crystal, which is the song that closes out side A of the self-titled Fleetwood Mac album, which was the first one to feature Lindsey and Stevie. And I would say the version on this album actually rivals the one that's more familiar to Fleetwood Mac fans. And one of my favorite things about this record are the second song on each side, Stephanie on side A and Django on side B, which are just really short solo guitar pieces by Lindsey, where you hear some guitar playing there from a younger Lindsey Buckingham that really is as good as anything you can hear on any later Fleetwood Mac album. So if you're a fan of the Mac and you're not familiar with this, or maybe you heard a couple of these songs once or twice and never went back to it, I would, if you're a vinyl collector, go to the effort of trying to track this down. It's not an easy record to find, but I don't know if I would classify it as rare. You could probably expect to spend about 30 bucks on a decent play copy that hasn't suffered too much damage, which is basically what you're spending for a new piece of vinyl in 2018 anyway. So yeah, if you're familiar with Fleetwood Mac and you've kind of find that spinning Rumors and the self-titled album and Tusk and Tango in the Night, if those have kind of reached a point of saturation for you, this is a gem from 1973 that's just waiting to get on your turntable and kind of reinvigorate your interest in this well-known band. Thanks a lot for watching. You can check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube. And you can also read some great articles on the Feedback Society. Thanks a lot.